What's up, Madridistas? This is Kian Sobani. Today's YouTube clip is about Carlo Ancelotti's press, and it's about Vinicius Jr.'s long-term health, and it's about referees from the Mallorca game. So it jumps into a discussion we were having about Real Madrid's opening goal against Mallorca, where Fede Valverde and co, they have a nice pressing sequence, they win the ball, Vinicius Jr. scores. So the clip starts off with that discussion and branches out to a more broad discussion about Carlo Ancelotti's press and the evolution of it over the past year or so and what it means long-term for Real Madrid. And then we talk about referees and Vinicius Jr. Now, a heads up that the audio from this clip rather, is pretty poor. Actually, in my opinion, it's pretty bad. Now, I hope that doesn't take away from the content, which I think you'll still enjoy, but just wanted to give you a heads up. The reason for that is because I had my microphone plugged in, but I forgot to link it to the actual recording, so my bad. I apologize. And the visual context of this clip is that it was in Washington, D.C., where Om and I, we got together after the Mallorca game. We actually watched the game together and we recorded a podcast after, and it was kind of a secret podcast. I mean, the audio went up for the public and everyone got a chance to listen to it around the world, but the context behind it is that on Saturday night, we had a huge podcast in DC where people came out and we had a really fun podcast, really interactive Q&A. We did a trivia. We recorded a bunch of things, and we didn't upload the full content of that online because a lot of that was more of like what happens in DC stays in DC for the crowd who was there. But we also let the crowd in DC know about like this secret podcast. Hey, we're here Monday night. You guys can come out and see us Monday as well. So a few people came out on Monday night as well. So Om and I got together and we recorded that. And just a heads up, so today is Wednesday. So tomorrow we have the world famous Real Madrid mailbag with Lucas and I, and it's a special one because it is preceding El Clasico. So it's an El Clasico mailbag to get questions in and also to access the actual podcast once it's done recording. Patreon.com/Managing Madrid. And if you want some behind the scenes El Clasico stuff, because I'll be at El Clasico this weekend as press, go to my Instagram at KianSo. KIYANSO at KianSo on Instagram. I'll be pretty active on the stories, and you can see some of the behind the scenes from the stadium and all that stuff. So go follow me there. Go to patreon.com/Managing Madrid. Become a member there. We're almost at 1,000 patrons, and once we hit 1,000, we're giving away a signed Cristiano Ronaldo jersey. So get in on the action, tell your friends, and enjoy today's clip. Let's go. Well, that's the thing. Like, so when you watch sequences like that, as a viewer, it's very easy to analyze. Where you're like, okay, he could have done anything in that situation except give the ball away to Fede. He could have, if he didn't feel comfortable hitting that pass out wide, he could have literally just cleared it. He could have kicked it anywhere. He could have kicked it out of bounds. He did have a couple outlets if he passed it back, but those angles maybe weren't as easy to hit. As a viewer watching that, it's very clear. But then I feel like one thing that we have to take into account for is when you're in that situation, you see Fede Valverde sprinting there, and you see Mendy rushing down the flank to close that pass as well. Your mental ability to think on the fly it's much more challenging than when we see it, right? And I think that's part of the thing with pressing. It's like, you look at pressing numbers and you can see like, well, in one of the most deceiving stats is, a player's pressing percentage, because like pressing is a collective effort. So if a player doesn't win the ball right away with the press, and but he makes the pressure, somewhere down the line the team can collectively win possession because of that one act earlier, right? And I think this one was an interesting pressing sequence, and I don't have it in front of me or anything right now, but it doesn't start off as a really obvious pressing sequence. All of a sudden you see Benzema kind of just ushering Fede and Vinicius to come higher up the pitch, and all of a sudden Mallorca go from having these clear passing lanes to all of a sudden it's just closed down. It's very quick. And I think I'd be curious to know what you think in terms of just like the evolution of it under Carlo Ancelotti, if that's even a thing. The reason I ask that is because like if you go back to the Rayo Vallecano game, that was 2 games after the PSG game. So the theme after the PSG first leg was we didn't press at all, and then everyone, the media, the fans, everyone started writing their narrative in the agenda articles. We need to press, hammering it home. And Carlos said, the board's not happy, press. And Carlos started saying in the media, okay, we're going to practice the press leading up to the PSG game. And then so like, I was looking at the Rayo game. Rayo game is this weird thing where it's like, as Carlos says, we try to press, but it was so disjointed because trying means like someone somewhere in like the 10th minute decides to press by himself, and then everything just falls apart. And against that, in that Rayo game, there were a few sequences like that where Rayo just weren't good enough to take advantage of that. And then you fast forward, maybe there's like some improvements with it. Compare this to where it was way back in the beginning of the season, where it was getting blown away, but it was also forcing a bunch of turnovers. So it was like the thing we had predicted, like a lot of goals scored, a lot of goals conceded. Compare where we are now to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's drastically different in terms of like the structural integrity and all of that. I think the effort in these last games has been way better, though. Part of it is that Hazard is not a starter anymore. Like, some of our worst pressing performances actually came when Hazard was out there. Asensio not being in there when we're deciding to high press is a big thing. Rodrigo's effort, speed, way different. And I think the PSG loss in the first leg was a little bit of a kick up the ass, to where it wasn't just Ancelotti feeling the heat, it was the players. And so even though like I'm not convinced with what I'm seeing on a structural level, I mean, I didn't expect it to be able to change that quickly. That's not how pressing works. The effort seems demonstrably better. And then you throw Fede in there. I mean, obviously, we talk about how Modric is ageless and everything. We say that, but it's clear Fede has more legs. And that if we're playing a high-pressing style, he's more capable of doing what he did on that goal, which is, you're right, like it's easy to say when we're a viewer and saying he should have made a different decision. Fede was on his ass, like in an instant, and he lost his head because he just didn't have time to think with Fede breathing down on him. He was physical too, right, which is why they were complaining about a foul afterwards. So he goes all in, and he's a smart presser as well. And so on occasions like this, it can just kind of come together. And that was a really opportunistic one as well, right, because it wasn't starting out as a coherent press. It, as you said, Benzema ushering people together, and then Fede just goes. He triggers the entire thing, wins the ball by himself, basically. So, yeah, I would say effort is the main thing because, yeah, in the beginning, it wasn't working structurally, but, like, it did not look like a lot of players on the pitch really wanted to press either, and that's a massive problem. That leads to, like, the type of embarrassing breakdowns we saw earlier in the season.
But see, and that doesn't add up, though, because it's like it shouldn't be a player's decision. It should be, like, basically predetermined behind the scenes and how it works and how it functions. It shouldn't be up to like an individual player or two, right?
Part of that could be like players also need to have confidence in the press, because what we're seeing with Manchester United now, for example, with Rangnick going there and trying to institute what is essentially a pressing, counter-pressing style, is one, I wonder what their commitment is to a guy who's only an interim coach, but they've slowly like drawn the intensity of the press back a little, but it's still way better than what it was under Solskjaer. But you can tell in certain moments, like, a player won't go, or he'll kind of hedge his run a little bit because he's like, I'm going to get bypassed anyway, or the guy behind me is not going to be there. Because one major problem with the press is, like, everyone will come to the wing. I don't want to talk about Manchester United too much, but just to finish the point, they come to the wing, right, and they mark all the options, and then McTominay will not shield the vertical pass into like a dropping striker and attacking midfielder, and it just gets broken, and everyone turns around and is like, what happened? And so on the next sequence, Rashford or Ronaldo, who already are not that keen on pressing, they're like, what's the point of arriving, right? And I think there was a real sense of that, along with kind of lazier individuals, like Hazard is just not going to press like that anymore. You kind of put that all together, I think that's what you got in the season. It's not just a question of players deciding, they have to like really buy in and like believe that the press is going to work. Carlo doesn't have a great track record with that. But as I said, I think the PSG loss was a kick up the ass, because it's like, whether they believe in it or not, like the players are like, all right, we got to do better, right? And in their mind, this is like the more proactive, more prideful way of playing, I guess.
Which brings up another interesting discussion and a little bit of a tangent, but so let's assume Carlo's most preferred identity is high pressing, high octane football, because that's what he played in 2015, and that's what he was begging to start this season with, and he tried hard to implement it, and it was like, no, it's not going to work. Let's just assume that maybe, and as much as he wants to say behind the scenes and in public, my tactical identity is that we don't have one, and that's our strength. It's, we can shape shift, we're like water. We can mold our way into different schemes based on the opponent. But just assuming, because we have a track record of how he's played before and how he wanted to start the season, that's how he wants to play. If he gets to build a team in his liking, will he bring that back, in the next 2 years? I mean, I'm asking a lot because we've all had our frustrations with Ancelotti, and we don't know what happens at Real Madrid in 2 years. We don't even know what happens in 1 week at Real Madrid. But I bring this up because you brought up Rangnick and Manchester United. Rangnick is a genius from what we can see. But implementing something, going to Manchester United as an interim manager is completely different than, being a genius and being there long-term over years. So when Rangnick comes in and sees that roster, it's super talented. I don't know if if you picked 11 players out of the air, I don't know if that Manchester United team isn't necessarily the one you're going to pick in terms of a high-pressing scheme. It may or may not be, but we know at least 1 or 2 players in that squad who are not going to press. But now it begs the question of how patient can you be to implement something like this if you build a squad over the time? You know what I mean? So you and I were talking about off air Ten Hag and Rangnick as a combo at Manchester United. Let's say you give them 3-4 years. Let's say if you also had that at Real Madrid, but you had that where Ancelotti gets to decide okay, these are my players I want to bring in. I'm sure Ancelotti maybe didn't ask for Hazard, and these guys, and probably wasn't going to give a chance to Isco to implement a high-energy style like this. But could you see this over the course of several years and with different players coming in and out where he could actually figure this out long-term?
I mean, let's make the assumption that Ancelotti has some kind of say and he's designing a squad specifically to that, because he's talking about bringing Mbappe in and maybe Holland in a high-pressing style. I just feel like Carlo will try it again real quick and be like, no, we're going.
Just for a few games.
That's not happening. But let's say he builds the kind of midfield he wants. Mbappe's going to come anyway, so let's include him. But let's say we build the forwards around him that'll press and everything like that. I think it could certainly be better because a lot of it is personnel dependent. But ultimately, a ceiling for a Carlo pressing team for me is not that high. Just mainly because Napoli is the big case study for me, right? He takes directly over Maurizio Sarri, who is extremely effective high pressing coach when he was there. All the players wanted to play that way. They understood. They understood the mechanisms, everything, and the press just got a lot worse steadily over time from a strong foundation. And it's just because I think Carlo's a little bit from another time, right? The types of pressing and the way it's understood now just didn't exist when he was coming up as a coach then, and that's just kind of an edge he lost, right? It's not like you can go online and read an article about it and be like, oh, I've updated myself. It's about specific training methods that tend to get passed by ear between coaches, essentially, right? Someone like Jesse Marsch gets mentored by Rangnick, and then he goes and takes that elsewhere, and he understands, completely ingrained in that philosophy, and he just copies so many of those training methods, and then maybe he adjusts something based on how he understands it. I mean, I don't think Carlo's necessarily going to do it at that point. It might be a case where he hires someone to come in and do that. I mean, Davide Ancelotti has been his assistant coach for a long time. It's not necessarily affected the pressing side, so I could see it certainly getting better just based on a recruitment perspective, because you could argue with Kroos, Modric, Benzema will press, but he's kind of old now. Asensio, we don't have perfect personnel for that, so we could upgrade in all those areas for it. It could get better, but ultimately, schematically, I just don't think it's Carlo's thing, and I don't think it'll ever be amazing if we just gave him that run of time.
Isn't there part of you deep down in your soul that would at least be intrigued if David and Carlo just swap positions? If David was the head coach and Carlo was the assistant, he was the assistant to the David, where he's the man manager guy. We all know Ancelotti is a beloved figure. Everyone loves him. We were talking on Saturday about his man management ability in terms of how it's different from Zidane, just in the sense that Ancelotti is actually has a really good friendship with these players right off the pitch. David seems like a brilliant just a tactics guy. I feel he's probably has a secret tactics Twitter account that we don't know, but we probably interact with him every day. We just don't know.
Probably calling him an idiot all the time.
Yeah, probably. That's he just blocks us.
I'd be really interested to see what his ideas are, because it's unless they sit down and do an interview and they're really open about what their philosophy is, what their relationship is, which actually is, I think, a thing coaches don't take advantage enough, but I'll get to that. Until that happens, we don't know who's saying who's influencing what, unless you have a reporter that has really good sources that are embedded, deep in the squad and they understand things. Usually that comes out later with the book.
Yeah.
We have so much understanding now of what Sir Alex Ferguson and his relationship with his assistants were, right? Like Carlos Queiroz and all of that. So I'd be intrigued because I want to know what his ideas are, because he'd get a chance, and then I could really understand, like, okay, this is Davide's ideas, these are Carlos' ideas, but I do suspect that a push for a lot of the modern things probably does come from his son saying, like, Dad, look, it's different now, we got to do some things, but who knows, right? And the reason I say coaches don't take advantage of that
Do you think he calls him Dad on the sidelines?
If he does,
or does he say Carlo?
If he says Carlo, that would be really funny to me. But yeah, I mean, just to wrap this point up real quick, it's a bit of a tangent, but I've been thinking a lot about, like, what are the effects? Because everyone always asks me, because I'm a Real Madrid fan, what is the importance of tactics when you're a Real Madrid coach? And so I've been thinking about a lot of the other things, and I think this ties back to tactics anyway, but one of the things that really benefits a coach is building an image in the media. Not just burgeoning your reputation, but it sends a message to squads ahead of time, okay, this is who this guy is, and it almost wins them over before you come. And I think that's one of the greatest things Pep Guardiola has done. I'm not trying to take away from his expertise. Like, unfortunately, I'm a Madrid fan more than anyone else who will probably, like, stand up and say he's a genius just because I'm a tactics guy. And I know most Madrid fans would loathe to say that, but a huge part of the fact that he's been able to get buy-in wherever he goes is he took advantage of that Barca spell, spoke openly to the press as much as possible, and be like, this is my philosophy. Let me explain it for you. I'm going to sound so intelligent and, like, so brilliant when I say all of this. People are going to be like, wow, people like me are going to, like, watch YouTube video and be like, this guy's a genius. And that spreads. And so when he goes to Bayern, they're like, okay, we're gonna give this guy time to do what he does. And he spreads his ideas through German tactics community, which is what we're talking off air with the guys who are sitting with us right now. And then by the time he comes to Manchester City, there's not a single player in that squad besides maybe Yaya Toure, who had a previous relationship with him, that was going to disagree with anything Pep said. He came in with total authority to implement these extremely intense, specific tactics. And I think this is what someone like Zidane, as he grows, needs to take advantage of. I mean, he hates.
Wait, but so you think that, like, that would buy more reputation than, like, so what bought Pep reputation was what he did with Barca, right?
Well, winning, and you have to win, right? You can't just talk shit to the press. But for example, like, but if you obviously have to be good. It's only something that enhances what you already have. But I think taking control of the narrative instead of letting the media, who does not understand tactics and what you're doing, take control of that, because then you get the reputation where, like, I mean, I don't have a problem with it because I don't really like Mourinho, but Mourinho somehow, after he had the record-breaking goal-scoring season with Real Madrid, had a reputation as a defensive coach. Right? And that's haunted Mourinho wherever he's went since then. And then he kind of, like, went a bit psycho and he played into it. And he's like, yes, I am a defensive coach, so what? But I think this is a lot of younger managers are doing. Like, remember that whole clip with Tuchel talking about with Rio Ferdinand, actually, right? And Rio was like, how do you dictate tactics to players? And he broke it down really nicely, right? He's like, I will never tell Marco Verratti what to do. I'll never tell Neymar what to do in a tight space and what solution. I'm sure you guys have probably seen this. And then he went on to say, but what I do is give them a framework to make those decisions by themselves in areas that are the most optimal for them to make those decisions, right? And so that's a message to superstars wherever he goes. Hey, I'm not going to step on your toes. You can be expressive in my team. I'm just going to help you be more expressive in better areas, right? So I think that actually helps a lot, and it really helps buy over fan bases as well, which matters because it sucks when you come in and everyone's like, get out, right? Like, that hurt Benitez. No one wanted Benitez here. Yeah. The fans didn't want him here. The players heard things about his reputation, and the way he handled himself with the players didn't help. So I think it's just, even if it adds 1-2%, that stuff matters. And I think that's things a lot of young coaches especially are taking advantage now, and that maybe in the past only a couple did, right? Like Cruyff would take advantage of it, Arrigo Sacchi would take advantage of it, and Carlo does it in a different way. He does it in his own way, and that's where I think, for honestly, if you're like all the things Zidane can improve in, I think that's what he can improve in. Like, I know he hates talking to the media, I get it, I wouldn't like it either, but no one knows what he's thinking, and no one can point out what his philosophy is because he doesn't tell anyone.
Yeah, I mean, he just doesn't talk about it. I think he's actually said in the past, he's like, he literally said he doesn't like talking about it. But the thing is, like, with Zidane, you just couldn't win because if anyone asked him a question about tactics, we all begged somebody should ask Zidane about tactics. But then anytime someone did, he wouldn't answer it. So it was just like a lose-lose because we were all complaining about the questions that were getting asked of him, like, why aren't you playing Bale? What happened with this player on the bench? And he would just give short answers. And then when you would ask him a real question, he'd also give short answers. But I'd have to go back to see, because I wasn't covering Real Madrid really from a professional standpoint back when Carlo was the coach the first time. Lucas was, so I don't remember.
I remember a really famous line when we started off really shaky in the 2013-14 season, and he's like, "We need to find our equilibrio," and that was in the press for the rest of the season. And then when we got the lineup with Di Maria, Xavi, Modric, press is like equilibrio, it's finally here. Carlo doesn't do it like Pep and others do because he's not a guy that sits down and explains tactics like that. But he just has
But he doesn't. He does a lot now this season. That's my point.
He's doing more now. But I'm the old Carlo, and in kind of his prime when he was in the environment that suited him best, he would just pick the one line that would communicate the idea he wanted, and it would win so many people over. And that was kind of a more old school way of doing it, as opposed to just being really open. I don't want to throw too many anecdotes here, but we also interviewed the Real Betis Femenino coach, and the first thing he asked us was, when is our thing going to go up? Because he had a game the next day and he didn't want to give everything away for the game. But he said, after that, I have no problem literally telling you everything, because it doesn't matter. If you're a good analyst, everything I'm going to tell you, you can find anyway. There's no secrets in tactics necessarily, because 95% of it, you just have to watch what's happening on the field.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people like Pep and Klopp and stuff, Pep mostly, but Klopp has also done it as well, realized is it's not as much of an advantage. Sir Alex Ferguson, at one point in time, had a strict policy, and people got in trouble for it. You could not reveal anything about what Manchester United's plans were, because that was the conception of tactics. It was all surprise, surprise, surprise. And that still happens here and there, but why would Pep Guardiola, what surprises with this philosophy? Right, it's been talked about so much. Why doesn't he just take?
Ironically, when he does try to surprise things, he gets knocked out of Europe.
Yeah, and so it might as well just explain it and take charge of the narrative himself. But the thing with Zidane is he also liked to surprise more than most modern coaches, and it almost felt like an old throwback. So maybe that's part of it as well. We should probably talk about the game at some point.
Yeah. I guess I'll just end by I'm actually really interested to see how Davide Ancelotti's career goes. At some point, he is going to become a head coach. I'm rooting for him.
We need to see the LeBron-Bronny thing. Carlo becomes assistant, for the first stint and guide him.
Let's talk about the game. So I feel like I really don't even know where we left off, but I feel
we did not even start talking about the game.
Back to the starting lineup. No, I think the theme for me very early was, and I hate that this is a theme. I genuinely hate that this is a theme because I hate talking about the referee, but. Paulo Maffeo, I don't know if we have a minute on that. Do you have a minute on the notes on when it happened? But he goes in, and I didn't really...
30th minute on Vinicius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
when Vinicius got carded, right?
Right. So this is how we know is because Vinicius got a yellow card for that tackle and not Pablo Maffeo, which makes no sense. So when that happens, I didn't really realize the extent of how bad the tackle was until the replay shows Maffeo just coming with the studs really high. And we were looking at that, we're like, that should be reviewed for a red card. And then you're a couple minutes past, hold on, they didn't review it. Maffeo didn't even get booked for that. And then later on, Maffeo's still making these crazy challenges. He gets a warning, and then he finally gets his yellow card on the penalty that they concede later in the second half for a challenge that he didn't even make because he was just talking shit to the referee. So I guess my point is I actually think, and I can't prove this obviously, but I just a theory. Rodrigo's injury at the end comes back full circle to the
100%.
Ref letting that go
100%.
because Mallorca was all right, free reign. It's just free injuries for young, talented Brazilian players all night, and they were just going at us all game. And that Rodrigo thing, and we can talk about that quote. Who was the guy who made the foul?
Rayo.
Tell him what he said after the game.
Rayo, I think, is the more accurate way of pronouncing it, but he said he touched the ball first, and that if they were wearing a white shirt, it would have been different, and that it was Rodrigo's fault. A completely shameless statement that boiled my blood on top of many other things. I'm not someone who talks about the referee at all. anyone who knows me knows that I genuinely hate talking about it. I don't like the whole, oh my God, there's an agenda against Madrid, there's an agenda against Barca. It's the most boring thing in the world. But this is a player safety issue, and because of that, I feel compelled to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
It was a physical game for the start. You expect that. You're away from home. You're at a small stadium with a small team. You're going to play with that intensity. I'm not saying football can't be physical, but as a referee, you need to understand how to control a game. And the referee's policy was let everything go. And really early on, when we saw that tackle on Vinicius, you realized that was a dangerous policy. And I tweeted out, I think twice before it happened, someone is going to get injured. And Rodrigo got fucking injured, and it pissed me off. Like, that, I mean, he put the players in danger through the way he managed his game by not calling anything that wasn't absolutely obvious, like, you know, a transition foul on a counterattack was a yellow card. Okay, literally, that's a written rule. You have to do it. There's no interpretation there. Everything else that could have been interpretation, he let go. The most dangerous of challenges. And it was going both ways a little bit really early on. Rodrigo had an elbow in Kubo's face. I'm not trying to say, like, oh my God, Mallorca came out and they were, like, evil or anything. They came out playing the physical style you'd expect, but they're going to react to what the referee does. So when the referee says, I'm going to allow this, they're going to fly in with that challenge again, because why not? And it just got more and more ridiculous throughout the game. And the Rodrigo challenge was kind of the breaking point. You see him go down, and you're just like, it's ridiculous. Like, the way he managed this, like, I mean, there should be, like, a little bit of an inquisition on him and be like, what the hell were you doing? Like, this is not a way to manage a game. And on top of all of that, there was an ugliness where reportedly Vinicius faced racist abuse in the game. So, like, it was just, in its entirety, was a horrific advertisement for La Liga. They're lucky this was a Monday night game where no one was watching, because it was pretty embarrassing to call myself a fan of this league when the match went down the way it did. And Rayu, or however you pronounce his name, he should have shut up afterwards. Like, he should have understood what the look was like, and he should have just been like, it was unfortunate. He could have even said it wasn't intentional. We would have believed him, and he could have just gone his way. So, like, the entire way this thing played out left a very bad taste in my mouth. And I think all of these things are really serious things, which is why, for the first time in a very long time, I have a lot to say about the referee.
I hated that quote at the end. It's just like, I just always hated that victim mentality thinking, but to actually come out and say that it was Rodrigo's fault is insane, and then to come out and complain about the referee after the shit that went down all game. And look, I've never been a conspiracy guy, but I've always been the guy, and I've always stuck by this point that the referees suck for everybody in Spain. And they've actually, many would argue, they suck everywhere. They suck in England, they suck in Italy. But we're just talking about La Liga right now. They suck everywhere in Spain. And, the Rodrigo elbow to Kubo, to be quite honest, I thought should have been reviewed too. I didn't realize how bad it was until I saw it after the game. But this goes back to, once you let like one or two dangerous things go, players just have free reign. And that's not a good thing. I think and was it you that tweeted about, like, I don't know if it was you or Matt, but just the fact that Vinicius is like one of your most marketable players.
That's what I tweeted. Yeah. It's a bad policy for the league. Do you want your most exciting, most watchable players in an era where everyone is going to the Premier League, where you lost Ronaldo, you lost Messi? Even if you're going too far with it, it makes sense that you do an NBA thing where you try to protect the stars, right? Because they are your biggest investments. Like, it doesn't make sense on any level. La Liga does not benefit from this in any way, and yet this is not the first time we've seen stuff like this. So, yeah, it's really frustrating. Vinicius, I don't know how he hasn't been injured seriously by a challenge this season with some of what he's taken. Like, Vinicius, in my opinion, is literally the most exciting player in the league. I know I'm biased as hell, but...
Well, who would be competing with him? Benzema?
Benzema,
yeah. There's no one...
Maybe Barca players like Pedri.
Ansu, if he's healthy.
Ansu is really exciting. Yeah, Pedri, but not in, like, the explosive way. Like, I think Vinicius is the most exciting person in your league. And you're going to create an environment where dribbling is dangerous because people are coming. I mean, we saw what happened. I mean, Mourinho has that amazing quote about Hazard, right? Which obviously he was saying to protect his player, but the whole thing is they're going to ruin his career and damage his career if you don't protect this guy, and it's going to come back to bite him, and it ended up happening. Now, Hazard did not work hard, he did not condition himself, but, you see similar things with Neymar. The only two players that have been protected that way are Messi and Ronaldo. And we like to make fun of, how they're playing now and stuff, but their longevity is insane.
Yeah.
And obviously that's their professionalism and everything, but part of it is that they were the two players that everyone recognized. We got to protect them because they're the biggest exports for us. I'm not saying it needs to go to that level where you're allowing a player who's considered to be like Messi to talk back to the ref and insult the ref and stuff. Obviously not. Have control of the game. But to me, calling stuff that are fouls seems like a perfectly reasonable level of protection.
That's why I kind of always I don't support diving, but I've always sympathized with players who embellish a little bit, to make a point. And I always kind of took Neymar's side for that reason too. Is there a part of you that's concerned that if Vinicius follows the Neymar trajectory, that by the time he's 30, he just kind of battered down?
I'm really worried. This is the thing I tell people all the time. I don't know how many times I said it on the podcast. The thing that worries me the most about his career is him taking a nasty challenge, and it kills his explosiveness. Because obviously he has so much technique and everything, but a fundamental nature to his game is he's faster than everyone else. And for that to be taken away by some idiotic challenge, that would be my biggest concern.
I think that it's just a concern for any player who's explosive. We look at the NBA players right now. It's that's a big concern with people like John Morant right now, right? He just goes in without fear, and if he gets fouled, he gets fouled. If he dunks. Whatever happens. Vinicius, his idol is Neymar. He's always had that side of his game where he provokes challenges, and not in a way that would be necessarily his fault, but he really likes just humiliating defenders. And defenders just get pissed off. They come in with their studs, they come in with legs flying. So I just hope that... Now, I don't know for sure, but I feel like Vinicius has just a stronger resilience with his physical ability than Neymar did. I don't know. It just seems like he has a little bit more muscle to him and a little bit more, bulk to him, that he could maybe avoid some of that, but we'll see.
But the thing is all it takes is one injury, and then the chance for re-injury appears instantly, right? It's your ability to your resilience to injury is never the same, especially if it's ligament damage or something. And that I'm really worried about that first injury, because I believe he can sustain a lot for a long time, but at a certain point it gets to be, even with Ronaldo, right? I mean, his issue was more tendonitis and everything, but it was an accumulation of everything and all the stress that he faced. Now, I mentioned him as one of the more protected players in the league, but when he was in the Premier League, that was not the case. He took a lot of damage when he played there. So that's my worry, is that first one, and then you have to be so careful about how you bring him back, because you could enter that re-injury cycle, and that's just I don't want to ever have that discussion with Vinicius.
All right, well let's have enough for tonight. Then.
Yeah.
Let's save it for
I'm getting agitated here. Yeah.
All right, so what else stood out?